Okay. If you can see me, let us know. If you can hear me, if you can hear me, clap your hands 2 times.
Give us a thumbs up.
That's what I used to do when I taught kindergarten. If you can hear my voice, clap your hands 2 times. Hey everyone,
whatever works.
To our second book club video. If you missed the first one where we went through the introduction to volume 6, I will link that. And you can go back and watch the introduction at some point. But we're going to jump right in today with chapter 1. I'd love to hear from you if you are following along with us, or if you're watching this, please leave a comment. Or if you have any questions as we're talking, I will try to access them on Facebook as we are doing our video.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up. So hopefully between the two of us.
You do? Okay. I'm trying to get
we'll see if we can.
Yeah, we'll try to see your comments as we go. But yeah, I'm excited to have this opportunity to kind of go through the volumes again. I think this is just so important, and yeah, I'm really excited that we are doing this. So thank you, Shay, for taking the time to talk through this with us. How have you been? This is just so important, and my phone is now talking back to me.
I'm really excited that we are doing this.
Okay,
thank you, Shay, for taking the time to talk through this with us.
How do I turn this off?
I can't.
I clicked on the comments on Facebook and then it started talking to
Our
me.
expertise is Charlotte Mason, not technology.
It's okay. But I did see that Hope and Dawn are watching. Hi.
Yay!
Yay. Yeah, we're glad you're here. So,
okay, now mine's talking. Okay.
I told you. You click on the video and then it starts talking. Yeah.
I fixed it. It's gone now.
Okay, well, hopefully I can figure it out too. But yeah, so let's dive in here. So chapter 1 is called Self-Education. And Charlotte Mason's famous line is, there's no education but self-education. So in the introduction, we were talking about how, she's this is at the end of her life. She's taken like her whole life's work and all the experiences she's had and all the different teachers that have used her philosophy in schools and kind of just boiling it down to, this is what I'm trying to offer the world.
Yes.
And so I think it's very fascinating that she starts off her whole philosophy with kind of this overarching principle that what she is proposing is radically different than most all education that I know of philosophies, right? Except for maybe like a child-led Waldorf kind of philosophy. But, in her day, and again, in our day too, education is very teacher-directed. So her philosophy is kind of this principle of the student's self-education, but not child-led. That it's something different than that. So why do you think, in just your own opinion, she started it off with this concept?
Well, I was thinking, I think because she talks over and over in this chapter about it is a philosophy. She's really driving home that this is a philosophy, a theory. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, and we'll ask all these questions when we meet Charlotte Mason one day.
Yeah, right.
But I wonder if it's because in order for you to really grasp how different this is from just the normal run-of-the-mill education, the way it had been then and it is now, that we need to grasp this concept first. That this is really the underlying foundational idea that it is a self-education. And I think one of the themes of this chapter is she gives us the reasons why it's important that it is a theory based on this foundational truth that she believes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Because, if you can, well, let's just be honest. When I first got started, I bought a whole bunch of Charlotte Mason inspired stuff that wasn't, and I didn't understand any of the philosophy. So I didn't understand this whole concept of self-education. And it was still very teacher-led and teacher-driven and frustrating. And so, you can take some of her philosophy. You can go do nature study, or you can, start to read living books. You can start to practice narration. But if you're missing the philosophy, you're not giving your kids what she was proposing. And so this whole chapter here this is it. Like, you have to
Mhm.
grasp this concept that what you're providing is very different than a traditional education. And that can be hard, especially if you have family or friends who are like, what in the world are you doing?
Yes.
Where
Where
are
are
your
the
textbooks? Where's the
where are your textbooks?
How do you
Yes.
know they're actually getting any of this?
Right. Mhm.
And if you want to be able to justify that to them, but mostly to yourself, right? Because it's the philosophy that's going to drive you and keep you motivated and keep you going on days when it's frustrating, because it is different, you know. Um, but I definitely see that in my older children who are in college, and I'm sure you could speak to this as well. And I was actually reading an article just this week kind of about this concept of, in today's world, you need to be able to kind of recreate your professional knowledge every 4 years,
Mhm.
because things are changing so fast. So you could
Yeah.
get a degree in marketing, and 4 years from now, everything you learn will be obsolete.
Right.
And so, are
If
you
you're not a
able?
self-learner, then what are you going to
What do you
do
do?
4
Right.
years from now?
Mhm. Exactly. And so you might, or you might change professions. You might not have this knowledge base, but can you go find that information? And again, today's world's very different. She talks in here about finding information in books and things. And, she says what a child digs for is their own possession. So
Yeah.
they're digging and finding these things. And, in today's world, that might be going, buying a course online, or going and reading some articles online. I mean, it's different, but it's still the same principle of, are you a self-learner? Do you know how to teach yourself things? Are you
Yes.
able to think for yourself, or are you dependent on a teacher to tell you things, to tell you what's important? And as a teacher, I'm like, I was so used to, is this gonna be on the test? Do I need to know this? Why do I need to know this in life? And I'm like,
Yes.
I
You have to decide
don't
why.
know why I need to know this either, but
Right.
the state says we have to know this, and we're gonna take a test on it.
Mhm.
And so, let's keep going, kids, and that's, what she's saying is, that doesn't motivate anybody, right?
And the frustration level for students and teachers, and parents who want to implement Charlotte Mason but don't grasp this concept, I think is very high. There's a very high frustration level.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do this but you don't grasp this,
Yeah.
we get a lot of questions from parents who feel burned out, feel like it's too much. Feel
Right.
like I have too many children and I don't
Yeah.
know how to implement this. And most of the time, I feel like their frustration levels come from not really understanding this beginning principle, this beginning concept, that it really is a self-education. And if you can help yourself understand that, then once again, we've said this multiple times, the why behind the how and the what,
Mm-hmm.
then the frustration levels inevitably go down because you're viewing everything you're doing from a totally different perspective. So
Yeah.
this chapter is really, really important and valuable, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's kind of dive in here. So in the first page of this chapter, she says, we are profoundly skeptical as to the effect of all or any of these activities upon character and conduct. A person is not built up from without, but from within. That is, he is living. All external education appliances and activities which are not intended to mold his character are decorative and not vital. So,
That kind of
we are growing a person, developing their character. That's coming from inside of them. That has to be within them, and everything we're trying to put on top of them and shape and mold them, and that's decorative, which I think.
yes. I just think this is such a great filter for when you're thinking about what you're going to include or involve. Like, is it decorative, and is it just decorative? And
Yeah.
it's okay to have some decorative things. We have
Yeah, right.
decorative things. We had a really fun day last week. It was just a unit study day. It's not that we don't do that at all, but it's that if that's all that I'm doing is the external educational appliances and activities, which, to be perfectly honest, when I taught public school, that was the majority of what I did,
Yes.
because you had to show that you were doing something. I mean, to be quite Frank. And that those external places and activities they can look great, but when it's internal, like she says here, it is molding their character. It is vital, but you may not see that with your eyes in something that's cute and crafty and is up on the wall. For people, that's what you did today. You created a blah blah blah, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's so important to think about.
Yeah, and that can be hard, especially like in our Instagram age, right? And you see all these cute little flat lays that people make, and you're like, well, we didn't do anything like that today. We just read and talked about books, and you're like, what?
Here's my stack of books, but
yeah, you can't take a picture of that, right? You can't take a picture of the internal changes that are happening to your children from these ideas, and you might not even see those changes for years.
Yes, and sometimes they are not, until they get older, they can't vocalize those things that they're seeing. Especially, parents talk about, well, I'm not getting a good narration.
Mm-hmm.
And that is important. But at these younger ages, when people really start with Charlotte Mason and they're like gung ho, okay, and then they get a little older, okay, we're not going to try this anymore because we based it on what these younger kids are, maybe they thought they got or didn't get. But if you're not willing to wait that amount of time, like you just said, until you see those connections, or maybe they can't vocalize what they really got.
Right.
But you might not know until they're 3 or 4 years from now, or especially if you're using the 4-year history cycle like we do, sometimes you don't know till you go back through that history cycle again.
Yes.
And then you think, I thought you didn't listen to a thing I said when I read that book to you. But they do remember, they do, and it's that internal. Yeah, it
right. I mean, when you think about that, right? Okay, so we're doing the 1800s. Yeah, we did it 4 years ago. Was the last time we did it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And when you think about that, especially when I think about the kind of education I was giving my students when I taught public school. If 4 years later,
huge.
I asked them some of the things that we had talked about and the impact that it made, or if they remembered such and such, they would have looked at me like, what? Because the focus was on recall and getting the information in and then recalling it as fast as possible before you forget it. Well, then they forget it, right? And so this process of self-education, the living books, and we'll talk about those a little bit here, in the narration, right? That they're making that their own. They're digging for those own possessions. They're making it their own, and they don't forget it. Like they might forget the name or that battle, but they don't forget the idea. And like you were saying, I'm amazed at some of the things they tell me that I'm like, I don't remember talking about it or reading whatever it was, but they remember it. My long-term memory or my short-term memory is going these days. Oh, Shay, are you here? Hello, Shay. Uh-oh. I think she's frozen. Hold on a second. Oh, she's coming back on. I will let her come on and see what happens here. Let me turn her off and maybe she'll come back on. If not, it might just be me. All right, well, let's keep going here and then we'll see if she jumps back in here. So she goes on to say, we're not offering children mental gymnastics. And I love that picture, right? Kind of like teaching them tricks or little fun things to kind of get their learning going. Oh, her power went out. Okay, let's see here. Hey!
Hello, my power went out.
That's not good. What you doing over there?
And my...
Nope, there she went again. Okay, well, I'm just gonna keep going. Sorry, people. We're doing the best we can. So she says, the mind is sustained by only one thing, and that is ideas. since you probably heard that metaphor before. That's how I came up with the feast idea for original feast, right? That our minds can only grow upon ideas. And they need a regular, proper diet. They need variety in her diet. That's why she has all these amazing subjects that they can get these living ideas from. So she says, I've asked myself this question and have labored for 50 years to find the answer. And I'm anxious to impart what I think I know. But the answer cannot be given in the form of do this and that, but rather as an invitation to consider this and that. Action follows when we have thought truly. The life of the mind is sustained upon ideas. So I really like this because one, it shows how much time she's put into developing her philosophy. 50 years, a long time. Once again, say.
Can you guys see? Can you see me?
I can see you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see you, but hopefully it'll come up. My power blinked. I'm so sorry, and
Oh,
it
okay.
knocked my internet off.
Can you can't see me?
I can't see you, but that's okay. I can talk to you without seeing you.
We'll just pretend we're on the phone.
Oh, Lord, have mercy. Okay.
It's all good. It's all good. I was just reading from this quote. Let me read it again here. Where she says, I've asked myself this question, about what does the mind need here?
Yes.
And I've labored for 50 years to find the answer, and I'm anxious to impart what I think I know. But the answer cannot be given in the form of do this and that, but rather as an invitation to consider this and that. And I love that because I feel like a lot of people who I've talked to who have gotten burnout or stopped doing Charlotte Mason altogether, very much felt like they were in a box of do this and do that.
Yes.
And you have to do this. And if you're not doing this, then you're not doing Charlotte Mason education. You're failing. Why bother? The pressure to do this and that became too overwhelming. And she's saying that's not what she's offering. She's offering us an invitation. And I love that picture, right? Just consider this. Consider this way of teaching and learning. And here's an invitation to kind of try it. That to me feels welcoming and encouraging, not burdensome.
And it also is where the personalization comes in. If you want somebody to tell you what to do, and I've said this for years, the best thing about homeschooling is also the worst thing about homeschooling. And that's nobody tells you exactly what to do.
Right.
So, we can help people with principles. We can help people with ideas. We can give them book suggestions. Mm-hmm. But if you're really considering this whole philosophy, then that's where the personalization comes in. What does that translate to my children?
Yes.
My situation, my life experiences at this moment, whatever's going on with us.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Hopefully that makes people feel more at ease.
And confident.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of our minds feeding upon ideas only.
She says, this is where she keeps using that analogy of eating food. She must have really liked to eat because she uses it over and over again.
It makes sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah. She talks about that. And I love the fact that she almost is, this is what reminded me at the top of page 25 when she talks about there is no intellectual vitality in the mind to which ideas are not presented several times every day. So we eat several times every day.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're thinking about our children and presenting the ideas, that's why it helps me so much to think of it as a feast.
Yes, right.
Because we're given those ideas, but just because I give everybody the same size scoop of macaroni and cheese does not mean that everybody's going to eat as much macaroni and cheese. You
Yeah.
might finish your plate. I might eat a couple of bites, but the next time I make macaroni and cheese, you might eat as much as I do. So
Mhm.
if I remind myself that all the time when we read a living book, and I'm like, you guys did not get out of that what I think you should get out of it.
Right.
That's not the sustenance that they needed at that moment.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Later on, they might.
Right. And she contrasts that with kind of a typical education, right? And what
Yeah.
that produces. She calls it a casual diet of ideas. A casual diet of ideas is poor and meager, right? It's going to
Yes.
lead to not good health, right? Just like a poor diet would. Or like, since it's after Halloween, I just think of all the candy my kids have consumed, right? They would love to just live on candy, but it's
Yeah.
not going to make them healthy people. She says, our schools turn out a good many clever young persons, wanting in nothing but initiative, the power of reflection, and the sort of moral imagination, which enables you to put yourself in his place. I love that, which we call empathy,
Ooh, I love that quote.
Yeah. So she says, they might be clever, just having this meager diet of ideas. You can turn out a clever person from that.
Yes.
And I know we can all think of people, right, who are clever but don't have that deep sustenance to them and that deep
Yes.
character, right? But she says this kind of education gives them initiative, the power of reflection, and then moral imagination, which leads to empathy. And we probably do a whole talk on moral imagination and the importance of that, right? But we can
Yes.
kind of poo-poo on fairy tales, for instance,
Right.
or some of these books where either they're biographies, they could be nonfiction, or even historical fiction, where they're putting themselves in a person's shoes and really understanding what it would have been like to live through that person. We can poo-poo on some of that and say, okay, where's the meaty stuff, right?
Yes. Where's the facts?
Right.
Where are the facts? I don't see the facts. And how are my kids going to get educated if they don't understand and memorize the facts and can't speak them out?
Yes. Which,
Yes.
they do have that knowledge too, but it's these ideas that help them later on to process and understand the facts and have something to grab onto that makes them meaningful and connecting to them as a person. This spirit that she's talking about here. She says, the children ask for bread and we give them a stone. We give information about objects and events, which mind does not attempt to digest, but casts out bodily upon an examination paper, question mark, which I love, right? Like, and I totally felt like that as a student myself, but also as a teacher, that it was regurgitating information for a test, like basically just vomiting up a bunch of facts and information.
Mhm.
And that's just a disgusting picture, right? Like that's not the kind of like putting stuff into you, throwing up. You're not going to be a very healthy person that way. You're not making this your own. It's not changing you and becoming a part of who you are. And that's what the contrast is between living ideas and learning through that, and then the other thing of just information and facts.
I love that she constantly gives us these pictures too for us to think about the end goal and then look backwards instead
Yeah.
of, so we're thinking, okay, if the end goal is, like she says, children who have initiative, children who, and I'm thinking of my grown children, children who have the power of reflection, children who are empathetic, if that is the end goal, then how do I work backwards to that?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of us just throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and hoping it sticks, she's saying, I'm offering you this theory, this philosophy that will bring you that at the end, as your children are grown, when they're older.
Yeah.
And I until I found Charlotte Mason, I definitely had those goals, but how to really implement that in a homeschool setting with our full education, I couldn't understand. I didn't understand.
Yeah, there's a gap, right, between
Yes.
what we're offering and what we want.
Yes.
And she's providing that kind of bridge to, okay, here's how you can get there. And then she goes on, she quotes a bunch of famous dead people. And if you don't want to know who those all are, don't care. She's saying, I didn't just come up with this out of nowhere. Like, I based some of this is new, but a lot of this is old.
Right.
And so I think that's a fair consideration. And then she goes and she lists some benefits. She says, advantages of this theory I'm urging. Okay.
Oh, I love this list.
So here's the benefits here, people. Why are we doing this? Right? Okay. Number one, it secures attention, interest, and concentration. 2, children develop a copious vocabulary. 3, the intellectual occupation leads to chastity in thought and life. So again, molding that character. 4, we find our children delightful companions. And that is huge.
It is huge. It's huge.
5, they show delight in books other than just storybooks. So they enjoy books that are meaty or more
not just entertainment.
Right, not just
but they have something to give you, right?
Number 6, they generally love knowledge. And I think that's most of our motivation for what we do, right? We want our children to love learning. And that's a catchphrase, and it's used throughout schools and all kinds of educational conferences I went to. It's always a love of learning, love of learning, love of learning. We wanted that, but what we were doing was leading to the opposite of that.
Yes.
And then the last one she says is, children taught according to these methods do exceptionally well at any school. It is unnecessary to stimulate these young scholars by marks, prizes, etc. So they're intrinsically motivated to want to learn for learning's sake. So what are your thoughts on that kind of list? That sounds pretty awesome to me.
I think maybe we should just write these up in a really cute poster and post it where people can print it out and put it up wherever you school, so that you can say advantages. Or maybe if you have family members who say this doesn't make any sense, like, wait a minute, you don't understand. But I do think one of the things it's important to acknowledge is when we talk about it's unnecessary to stimulate them by marks and prizes, you're not ever saying you don't give grades, or that you don't, especially in today, you do give those. But it's like that's not the motivation. And it is hard for people.
My kids don't even see them.
Mine don't even know most of the time what their grades are. I use rubrics for writing and narrations 99% of the time. So they don't really know that's a grade. They think it's a guideline, especially we're talking, I have Form 4 now, so another one. But I think when you take that crutch away, especially if you're not used to this, it can feel like you're literally limping along. Like, how do I know? They don't have a grade for this. I don't have a test for them to check off. I'm not really sure. I have a friend who even sort of ditched Charlotte Mason for a while this year because she's like, I just have to have some grades. And it didn't last very long. She went to a textbook because she realized. So I do think that's one of the most wonderful things about her philosophy is I don't have to worry about, like it says, teachers are relieved from much of the labor of corrections. Yes. And it is a labor. It is a huge labor. And when you take that, especially if you have multiple kids, I got a grade. Okay, how do you, wait a minute, what do you,
as a public school teacher, I would stay up to like 10 o'clock at night grading papers.
Oh, me too. Yeah. Me too. And we had to do these, I was a kindergarten teacher, so we had to do all these assessments and stuff, when you're writing all this stuff. And it's a labor. And with my own children, I do want them to be delightful companions in learning. Mm-hmm. And so how do I do that? We come alongside each other. We have wonderful conversations, beautiful discussions around the table, or when they're given a narration that just leaps from the narration and think, I just had such an interesting conversation with my 15-year-old. Mm-hmm. And it's just not going to come when she hands in a test and like, Mom, can you grade this? It's just those things don't come. Right. So these really are fruit of your labor when you decide you're going to implement Charlotte Mason.
Yeah. In terms of rewards, I think that is a great point. It's not that they're not motivated to do the work to get the A. They're motivated to do the work because they want to know. That's the difference. And there's a book that came out in the 90s called Punished by Rewards by Alfie Kahn. And they did a whole bunch of studies on the effects of rewards. Do these actually work? And, and I think about it when I taught school. I mean, we had these elaborate award systems. And the reading program to get kids to read, it was like every couple books you take this
Everything's
test, and then you
leveled.
get prizes every week. And then
Yeah.
there'll be an ice cream social. And then there'll be
Right.
like they kept having to get, we'll take you to Carowinds, which is an amusement park. I mean, it was like this big, they had to get bigger and bigger and bigger rewards
Yes.
to get them to read. So they're not reading for the sake of loving to read.
Right. Because why would you?
Actually get stripped from them. So in one of the studies, they were giving young children kefir, which is like fermented yogurt stuff, right?
Yeah.
And some were asked just to drink it, and others were praised lavishly for doing so. But a third group was promised treats if they drank enough. Those children who received either verbal or tangible rewards consumed more of the beverage than other children, as one might predict. But a week later, these children found it significantly less appealing than they did before, whereas the children who were offered no reward liked it just as much, if not more than they had before. If we substitute reading or doing math or acting generously for drinking kefir, we begin to glimpse the destructive power of rewards. The data suggests that the more we want children to do something, the more counterproductive it will be to reward them for doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, and we do things because we think they're going to work. No parent just, does things like, okay, well, I'm going to do an elaborate checklist or an elaborate, you're not doing that. Just, you really want it to work.
Right.
And externally, just like that study, it might work for a time.
Yes.
But if we have the long view, like we're talking about, lifelong learners, people with empathy, people who can, learn on their own without somebody holding their hand for whatever they need to learn. It's just not, it's not effort for a long-term outcome.
Right, for sure. Yeah. All right, and then she goes on to talk about the motto. Let's talk about that for a little bit. She says she set up a correspondence school, which was her programs where, governesses or parents or schools who were using her programs, they would get a list of the books and exam questions for the term. And the motto for those programs were, I am, I can, I ought, I will, has had much effect in throwing children upon the possibilities, capabilities, duties, and determining power belonging to them as persons. Did you have any thoughts on that motto?
It's so empowering.
Yeah.
It is so empowering. And we have this on the front of our notebooks that we use for morning time. We have that motto. And we've talked about each one of those statements multiple times through the years. And it's so empowering for a child to have that in their mind to go back to, because there's a lot in the world that doesn't tell them what their possibilities are. Yeah. There's a lot in the world that doesn't speak to their capabilities. There's certainly a lot that doesn't encourage them to be dutiful, like she says here, their duties or their own determining power. And they own their power as a person, their own brain power, their own gifts, when they really understand that I am. She was so far ahead of her time.
I know.
Really. And she was 50. Like, that's the thing. I like all that other picture. 50. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
But I am, I can, I ought, I will. It's so simple and boiled down that you can say it every day. And yet it really does help a child own their own power, which is what she's saying, right? Own your own brain power.
Yeah. It gives them a vision. She says it gives them possibilities, right? It shows them that they're equipped to believe in themselves, right? And like you're saying, it gives them their individual power. She was so brilliant, so far ahead of her time, because nowadays there's so many studies on the power of affirmations and saying out loud positive things about yourself every day, and the way that actually does really change the physical structure of your brain.
Yes, amazing.
It's crazy, right? I've seen that in my own life. I wonder if I could turn my computer around. Can you see the board?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yes, there you go.
So we kind of wrote it out a little bit more. I am a child of God. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I ought to do what is right. I will try my best. Um,
So powerful.
and there's been times where I've had to say those to myself,
Yeah.
like different life circumstances, and I can do all things in Christ. I am a child of God. Like, just reminding myself of those fundamental truths. And it can seem kind of silly, right? And woo, oh, these positive affirmation stuff, whatever. But it really does. We're speaking truth to ourselves, and that is powerful.
Yes.
So yeah, I encourage you to use that motto with your kids. But yeah, it was very brilliant of her to utilize the power of these kind of affirmations, what we call them now. All right, and then she kind of teases us for the next chapter and says that children are born persons. This is her first educational crendo here. And she's saying, okay, do you want to test to see if these methods work? Well, here you go.
I love that.
Let him read to a child of any age from 6 to 10 an account of an incident, graphically and tersely told, and the child will relate what he has heard point by point, though not word for word, and will add delightful original touches. What is more, he will relate the passage months later because he has visualized the scene and appropriated that bit of knowledge. So here's the test. Read a living book and ask them to narrate it. And there you go.
There you go. It's so simple. It's
so simple. There you go. There's your test.
Yeah. There should be more, but no, there's not.
Yeah.
And I think the next line where she says a rhetorical passage written in journalese makes no impression on him. And that is really an important point because I know I've seen lots of different debates through what is a living book? Is this living? This is not. You should use this when you shouldn't. But it's obvious what journalese is. It's just those bare facts. It's not, there's no ideas in this writing.
A textbook. A reading passage, like we used to have we had those reading passages, and then there'd be questions afterwards. Those passages are horrible.
They're so boring.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, you can get a good grade doing that. There's a lot of children that can read that passage, comprehend it, answer the questions, and get a good grade. But once again, the point that she's making is it's not about that grade. It's about the idea. Is it feeding their mind? Are you giving them a Twix candy bar? Or are you giving them, which sometimes, hey, a Twix is good, right? I mean, I love those. But that is a malnourished mind. That is fed only on that. And there is a big difference. And, okay, I have to admit through the years, there's been a few books that I'm, this covers the topic. I'm just going to give this to him. There is such a difference in my children when they rarely complain about the books that we read. But if I give them one that's written in journalese, I can guarantee you I'm going to hear about it. There's nothing in this book for me to narrate, Mom.
Yeah.
There's nothing. This book is boring because it doesn't have the ideas and the original touches in their narrations don't come out because there's nothing for them to attach to.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Yeah, so you got to be careful what you're asking them to narrate for sure. And she says, reading those kind of journalese, you may have a child who's letter perfect. They might have really great grades.
Yes.
But the spirit, the individual has gone out of the exercise. And we're shaping someone's spirit. The education of a man is their spirit. And so
kind of breaks my heart.
Thought, right?
Yeah, it kind of breaks my heart for any child that has had their spirit not fed.
You
meet
a lot of them. Yeah, I've met a lot of them.
Yeah.
Sadly. And she says that this is the key to that attention, interest, literary style, wide vocabulary, love of books, readiness in speaking, which we all feel should belong to an education that has only begun at school and continued through life. So that is so key too, right? Like this is style of learning. We, even as adults, right? We want to have interests. We want to have wide vocabulary. We want to have ease in speaking. We want to be growing. We should be growing as well as our children through these ideas that we're taking a part of. That's the feast of what we're offering our children. The education is not for these couple of years to get you into college, to get you out of my house.
Get it done and leave.
This is, we're making a life here.
I love, she says that it's the open secret I'm laboring to disclose for public use. That is so, she's like, look, people, I'm trying to tell you, this is not as hard as you're making it, right? I
Right.
mean, this is an open secret. It's right here. And
Yeah.
it's really the simplicity of doing what she's saying in the passage you just read to get to those things.
Mm-hmm.
The simplicity is the why that keeps you going. I mean, that the key to attention. There's no parent that you would say, do you want me to help you, give you a secret of a key to attention? Would you like for me to tell you how to get your kids to have literary style, or how would they have a wide variety? Do you want them to love books? Here's your secret right here.
Yeah. That's actually funny. That's how I start my narration talks at the Great Homeschool Conventions. I'm like, okay, I have the secret to, and just the things that you listed. And here's the real kicker. It costs no money.
$0
here, people. Go to the library, get a book for free, and read it and talk about it.
It sounds
really simple here. This is not complex. Yes. And people are always like, I'm always like, what would you say if I told you I have that secret? I got your attention, right?
Yes, exactly.
And one of the questions I also get asked too, like, do you have any evidence of like kids who have used this method and how successful they are in life or in college or blah, blah, blah? I want some data, Well, she gives you, it says it right here, folks. During the last 30 years, thousands of children, so she's writing this in the 1920s, right? So imagine how many more thousands of children in the last 100 years from this time, educated on these lines, have grown up in love with knowledge and manifesting a right judgment in all things, so far as a pretty wide curriculum gives them data. So, I can't give you test scores or this many kids have been this and this is how much money they make, and there's no data I've seen on that, right? I can only go with, she had thousands of students who were successful through her programs. There's been thousands of students throughout the British Empire and here in the United States since it caught on in the 80s who have gone through this philosophy, who are successful in life. There's no numbers, but I don't more.
We're studying the founding fathers this year, and I can't remember which one we were talking about, but my Form 2 asked me, did they know? And it talked about they learned at home.
I learned at home.
And they read
a
lot of
most of them did, yes.
Yes, they were educated very much along these lines.
Yes,
even though she wasn't alive then. But
right.
And she asked
around, yeah.
Right, but she said, did she know Charlotte Mason? Did she? Somebody, because they recognized when it said this brilliant person who began the greatest country on earth was taught by this very thing here, with these great ideas from great books, this simplicity, without the decorative, pretty cut out construction paper crafts on the wall, right? And then they were still able to do these amazing things
without any multiple choice tests.
Right, not a single one. Can you believe that?
Still brilliant enough to write the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, lead a ragtag band of farmers to fight off one of the greatest armies in the world. I mean, like, brilliant minds came from doing this exact thing. So, yes, it's not just Charlotte Mason's evidence; it's the evidence of people. That's a good point. Throughout history, and my son just did a project on Alexander Hamilton, and we love the musical, and so we're singing and all that stuff, But one of the lines in the first song is getting his hands on every book he could afford. Like, talk about being self-educated. I mean, he was an orphan, right? And he realized if I'm going to be any successful in life, the only way I can do that is from these ideas that I'm going to find in books. And he would just spend all his money on books, And so I think it was really good for my son. He was like, wow, like, he did all these successful things. He didn't go to school. He just read books. He went to college for a couple semesters, but like, that was it.
Right. And I'll say too, and even in my own children, I mean, I have 3 that have graduated, and they're doing great. Some in college, some out of college, but I think the difference is that I still see them now wanting to learn things on their own. They still are learning things, not required things.
Right.
necessarily, but there's
No.
still this love of, I'm really interested in this.
Yes.
And I would
I
like to
love
learn about this
Yes.
thing. And Mom, you know what I found out? Or look at this thing. Or, there is a difference in the pathways in their brain
Yes, very much so.
that I can see than from I just see the difference. So it does come for those of you that have little ones and you're thinking, I don't know if
Yeah.
we've lived longer. You may have to wait longer, but
Yeah.
when you can feel overwhelmed. But I didn't have moms like that,
Right.
back when the internet wasn't a thing and I started homeschooling, to tell me that, okay, this does come around, but it does. You and I both have seen that in our grown and graduated.
And not even in my grown and graduated, even in like my middle schoolers. Just to give you an example. So, I have one daughter who's dyslexic, and so we've been doing oral narrations pretty much the whole time. I've, like once a week, I'll write down her narrations and keep them in our little narration notebook. And, this year I've wanted her to start typing her narrations on her own. And she, it's like one big long sentence, right? Because she's just free flowing talking, because she's used to narrations where she can just talk and talk and talk. And I'm like, okay, we'll do the text to talk to text app, so you can just talk and talk and talk, and then we can go back and edit it and work through it and that kind of thing. But the first one I told her to do was on Harriet Tubman, which she, again, learned about 4 years ago. And she's like, oh, we're doing the 1800s again. Can I learn more about Harriet Tubman? I was like, sure, great, So we're all into this. She read that the documentary on that on Netflix is incredible. Have you seen
it?
I
watched it. It's so good. Yes, I watched it. So good.
Anyway, so she wrote like 2 pages, and I almost cried because it was like,
the ideas are
kind of worries about, are they going to be able to do this stuff on their own someday? Are they going to take this narration and be actually able to write a paper someday? If they decide to go to school or whatever, can they communicate what they've been learning in a written form, And again, like I said, we had to go through and add lots of punctuation and capital letters and things with her ideas, right? But her voice was so clear in what she wrote. It was so creative and just beautiful vocabulary that I didn't even know was in there, and that comes from reading and narrating all these years. And so it was super encouraging. I know I teach this to people, but I still doubt sometimes, right?
Yes, of course.
And it was super encouraging for me to see oh, again, Julie, slap myself on the head. This does work.
Yep. And all of us have the days where, I have them too. I've been doing this a long time, but there's days I think, especially when their narrations just aren't good. You have those periods for whatever reason, or I say good, but not what I expect, which, of course we could talk about that for another hour. But on those days, that's when you need stories like that to be reminded, okay, this is doing something. I am feeding them a beautiful, nutritious meal of ideas every single day. It's just, you don't see it every single day. So those are the days we need the encouragement like that. So we can say, okay,
get up and do it again. Also, like with writing, you can get a paper from a younger child. You can teach them a formula to write, a 5-paragraph essay, or here's the sandwich method for writing a good paragraph. And, or you have to have this many adverbs and whatnot, or sentence openers. And, you can teach them things and you can get a paragraph out of a younger child. Yes. But Charlotte Mason was very wise and understood children's development, and that they needed this oral narration, and some kids need longer, like my child, because of their learning difficulties. And by waiting, you do really give them the opportunity to build their voice, and that comes out, and that's what makes good writing. You want to read some formulaic blah 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 information stuff? No, you want to read rich ideas too, right?
With the style, and that's with that literary style she talks about, that you can't really teach that. I've taught writing classes for years, and the only way you can teach it is to read it.
Yep.
It's like that intrinsic thing. You're like, okay, I can't describe to you the style that this book is written in, so you have to read it for yourself, and then we can discuss it, and then you can form your own. But the only way to teach literary style, you can teach the types, but for somebody to be able to write it is for them just to read it. That's the only way.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that is encouraging for some people here
I
who
hope
are
so
not
too.
sure, because Charlotte Mason very bluntly puts it this way: people are naturally divided into those who read and think, and those who do not read or think.
Tell us what you really think, Charlotte.
Oh, I love that so much. It's like, you're one or the other. Either you can read and think, or you can't.
Yeah, I mean, and it tells us our job is to put them in the first class, right? But they
Yes, we
are.
want to be the readers and thinkers.
Yes, I want to be a reader and thinker. I want my children to be readers and thinkers. Yeah.
And she does go on to say that's not all books. She says education is the science of relations, and they are occupied with things as well. So
Yes.
she talks about science, handicrafts, nature study. They have these, people are always like, where's the hands-on stuff in a Charlotte Mason education? I'm like, well, they're doing science experiments and they're making handicrafts and they're outside in nature looking at, like, I don't know if you can get more hands-on.
Exactly. Yeah. It may not be like the craft that you can put on the wall, or it may not be a diorama that you can take put on Instagram because your kids do a good job on it. But there is so much interaction with real life things, real life
things. That's the difference. Real life things.
Yes, real life things, real life animals, real life whatever, something that's actually real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the very last paragraph here to close out, I think, is just sums it all up so beautifully. And urging a method of self-education for children in lieu of the vicarious education which prevails, I should like to dwell on the enormous relief to teachers. A
Hallelujah.
self-sacrificing and greatly overburdened class. Amen. Like all my friends who are still teaching, I'm like, you're a saint. Like this, the stories you tell, I'm like, you're a saint. You're a saint, especially with going through COVID. I mean, they are saints, right? I'm so grateful that there's people who are teaching in these schools and blessing these children, but they are an overburdened and
yes, I agree.
Overlooked class of people. The difference is just that between driving a horse that is light and a horse that is heavy in hand, the former covers the ground in his own happy will, and the driver goes merrily. The teacher who allows his scholars the freedom of the city of books is at liberty to be their guide, philosopher, and friend, and is no longer the mere instrument of forcible intellectual feeding. And what a relief it has been to be a guide and a philosopher and a friend to my kids on this educational journey, rather than forcibly pulling them along, heavy in hand, pulling that horse that doesn't want to go.
Yes. And I think when we talk about homeschooling, there's a lot of people over the past couple of years who've been sort of forced into homeschooling, and I understand that. And we get the comments, so how do you keep doing that? How are you their teacher and their mom? How are you? But the difference is because we are coming alongside. Yes. We're coming alongside. We're not dragging them behind them, begging them to get this stuff done. But there is, I want to be that. I don't have to write that quote down. I want to be that. I want to be their God. I want to be to philosophize along with them.
Yeah.
I want to be their friend as they read these books and we talk about these great ideas, and I get to see the glimpses of their intelligence that I would not get to see any other way, and that enrich my own life in so many deep ways. I would miss out on that. If this is not what we were doing, I would miss that. And that's what you want to be able to say at the end of the day, is that, wow, this was such a peaceful day where we really did not have to force feed anybody, but we got to see the glimpses of those things that are going on behind the scenes. So.
Yeah, and I think that's where the burden and the stress comes in, where the parent is trying to forcibly feed what they think is important from the reading. They make sure they're covering everything. They feel this pressure that their kid's not, they're not getting enough out of this, or we're not doing enough, or, how do I know that they're really learning all of this? Are we keeping up with the Joneses, and that creates a lot of stress, rather than, like you're saying, having that peace. And again, that affects the atmosphere that your kids are going to pick up on, and trusting, kind of being able to relax into the process here. But, and in order to look for the ways that they are growing and to look for those opportunities and those discussions and to see the fruit when you're looking for it, it's
Yes.
there. But if you are so stressed and tense, you can't see it.
Right. hmm And we get so many questions, especially I feel like this time of year, it kind of starts.
Mhm.
We get so many questions about, I'm burned out.
Mhm.
We're not doing enough. They're not learning anything. We've been doing this since August, and and it's hard to see when you're this close
Yes.
up. Sometimes you have to take a step back. That's why I
Mhm.
love taking an exam, not always a week, but a few exam days, because you really take a step back and
Yes.
actually look at,
Yeah.
really intentionally look for some of these fruits.
Mhm.
And even in small children, I think you see them, but it is hard to see sometimes when you're so close up to it, yourself. Because our goal, and I've had many conversations about this, and even in reading this book like this, because you and I could do this and have this discussion, a million times. I mean, whether anybody's watching or not, but our heart really is for people to say, okay, I can do this.
Mhm.
I can consider this
Mhm.
and make it look like what it should for my particular situation. Maybe not for Shay's or Julie's or whoever else is, on Instagram and posts all the pretty pictures, but for my family, I can personalize this so I have peace
Mhm. Yeah.
when I'm homeschooling.
Yeah. This should not feel like a burden or like she's talking heavy at hand. You can
Yes.
lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So if you're pulling that horse every day, to try to get them and put in what you think is important,
Yes.
that's a struggle. Like wrestling a horse down to try to put stuff into their mouth, that's no fun.
And I've had days that it felt like I was doing that.
Oh yeah, me too. That's what I'm saying. I can totally. I feel like, and then at the end of the day, you're exhausted. Well, you've been wrestling a horse all day.
Yes.
Rather than-
Yeah, yesterday we had just like one of those really long days, and it was bedtime, and I looked around my house. What have I even done today? I mean, you can't look at my house until I've done anything. You
Yeah.
can't, there's still XYZ, the checklist didn't get touched. But those are the days I'm really grateful that God led me to this philosophy, to you, to Gentle Feast, to all the things that He's put in my path, because I can step back and say, okay, yes, but we did this, and I know the meal was placed, the beautiful feast was in front of them. I know the ideas were offered, and I can rest and take a deep breath that the work was done. That was vital. That was important. It may not have been decorative. It may not have been external, beautifully external. My house may still be a mess, and I had nothing to post on Instagram today that was cute, but there was some beautiful work done. And those days add up, and they make they make you keep going.
Right. If you take the time to look for those wins. And I think we think if we just beat ourselves up enough, that will make us more motivated to be a better homeschool parent here or something like that, which is complete opposite, right? When we're encouraged and we feel like we're good at something, then we want to keep doing it, so look for the things that are going well, look for those, I call them wins. And just to give you an example here, and then we'll wrap up because I just think this is hilarious. So I was reading Caddy Woodlawn to my son, who is 10, and in it said one of the boys met his Waterloo, meaning like, he met his match or whatever. And so I read it to him. He goes, "Oh, Waterloo. I know what that means, that he met his Waterloo." I'm like, "You do? What does that mean?" He was like, "Well, that means like he was defeated, like he met his match." I was like, "How do you know that?" And I was thinking he would quote like Our Island Story and the wonderful things I read to him about Napoleon. But no, he goes, from that ABBA song, "At Waterloo, Napoleon did surrender." Oh yeah.
Whatever it takes. I love that.
So, the ideas are going in there. The education is in science and relations. So
we related it.
Wasn't considering, the music that we danced to in the car as being super educational. But you just never know.
A living song, apparently. Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So, all right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us, and we will see you in December to discuss chapter 2.